Hi, my name is Ken Schwartz of Precise Sharpening, and what I'm going to be doing in this video is introducing a 220 grit. This is the bamboo series of the Nubatama stones. So the stone is a pink stone, again 220 grit. You can hear it fairly coarse, and so we're going to go through the usual series of tests and see, first of all, how porous the stone is. Fairly porous, not quite as porous as some of the others. But let's give it the run through and see how it responds to a little bit more water here. Okay. All right, well, okay, I stand corrected. It's of a similar degree of porosity as some of the other stones we've been looking at in this course of a grit. You can see that it's still starting to begin saturating. So let me run a little water on this, and while that's going on, I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing in this. I'm not so much going to be sharpening as thinning the area behind the edge. That's a fairly obtuse bevel, so I want to make a more acute bevel. This particular knife is a Sanetu. It's a clad steel. You can see the cladding on there. The core steel is a ZDP 189, which is a Hitachi powdered metal steel. This knife is a Spyderco Mule. I've put some paracord on there. I've been slowly changing the angle on this a little at a time, using a convex grind and approaching more of a zero grind on this. So I'm going to work this a little bit more on here, again to thin out that convex edge to a more acute angle and be thinning most of the knife in the process. So it'll be cutting this whole surface. So let's start off with this one and we'll see where we go. Okay, so at this point, stone looks like it's holding its water pretty well. I think we can just add a little spray at a time. And so this would be if it was a completely flat grind, and that's the angle that the stone is at right now. So we're going to get, the knife is at right now, so we're going to go a little bit more acute right behind the edge. Let me grab this string so it doesn't make that noise so much. Okay, so it is abrading steel. Let's take a quick look at what it's actually doing. Okay, so we are working on this area a little behind the edge. You can see the finish starting to form, fairly coarse finish. So let's keep going. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of mud. Not much, so it's not a particularly muddy stone. And I think if we let it run just a little bit of water, we'll get a bit less of that mud on there. Okay. So you can see some of the mud build up right there. And we are getting more on there, but again, I'm primarily interested in going a little bit lower. What I'll do is I'll grind higher up on the surface of this at this point. Okay, so now we're pretty much grinding flat on the whole knife, and again pressing more towards the edge so that we get an increased amount of grinding at the edge. pink and gray is kind of an interesting color combination. Swarf. The mud provides what appears to, or feels like, an increased level of abrasion. Let's work the other side a bit. Let's look at this. So we're getting a sort of hazy looking finish with this coarse of a grit. Odd little bevel over here, but to get into this area over here, we really need to hold it at about this angle to get all the way in inside. And that's just a peculiarity of the shape of the knife. As much as possible, it's good to use the whole stone. So I'm working this area a little bit extra because typically the two ends of the stone get the least amount of abrasion depending on your style of sharpening. Some people tend to go across the stone in this direction and then across the stone in the other direction so that the maximum amount of wear tends to be in the center of the stone. If I'm doing straight up and down strokes, I tend to fairly uniformly abrade the middle area of the stone, but don't get right to the edge all the time, because if I miss then and hit the edge of the knife on the stone, I can potentially damage the edge I've been working so hard to create. Alright, so let's take a look at this, and this will give us a good idea of the surface characteristics. Again, I'm not specifically going for a sharper edge as much as I am thinning the edge. Okay? So what we get is a somewhat hazy finish. We are getting considerable thinning, which is reducing the angle of the convex edge to make this a little sharper. Again, this is an Aogami Super steel. And just to put a bit of an edge on there, we'll go up just a fraction of an angle. So we have moderately muddy stone. Appears to abrade well. Okay, let's rinse this off, and we'll go on to the next knife after looking this over just a bit. Again, the purpose of this was not so much to sharpen the edge, okay, as to thin it. So we're not really looking for a sharp edge at this time. Alright, so let's try this. This is a very different steel. This is a powdered steel, which means very fine carbides. ZDP 189 is known for having a very high amount of chromium in there. So the edge right now is at about that angle, and so I'm going to go down to about here. Fair bit thinner. I've used ZDP 189 and know that it is capable of taking a pretty acute edge. So I'm going to knock it down a little bit and go down a little lower. And we'll work this side until we can get a burr. See how long it takes. ZDP 189 is known as a pretty abrasion resistant steel. So let's see where we go. And again, we're not following the original angle on the knife, but going to a more acute angle. So the bevel width will be widening. Let's take a look at this side, and we'll get a better idea from this of exactly where we are grinding on the knife. So we can see that the bevel is a good bit wider. It's from the edge up to about there, so about 1/8 of an inch. Whereas here it's just almost a micro bevel, maybe a 1/16 to a 32nd of an inch. So it is widening it. It is cutting through the ZDP 189 successfully. You can see the grind marks on there. So it's pretty consistent. Pretty good. Well, you can see again the contrast between this side and this side to see just how it's cutting through the ZDP 189 successfully. So that gives us a good idea that it will handle a pretty wide range of steels. We did 2 extremes. This is, and you can see the surface of this steel, fairly rough. It has worked it a good bit. I've gone all the way up to about here. You can see it on this side as well. So yeah, this will be a very useful stone. In addition to using it for thinning, you can certainly use it for a coarse edge in a similar manner to some of the other 220 grit stones that I've used and will show in the very near future. I have a couple more to show. So that's it for this demo. And again, very interesting stone, a 220 bamboo stone. And take a look at it. It's over on Chef Knives to Go in Ken's Corner under the Nubatama stones. Thank you for your time.